Hi, my name is Doug Sharp. I am the host of the National Leadership Briefing, and this is the Midweek Touch Point. Well, this is the middle of the week of the National Leadership Briefing. So at the end of this week, this Friday, we are going to be having our next National Leadership Briefing. As you know, they happen on the first Friday of every month, always starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, always for no more than 1 hour, and always great information for you and things that you can use right now to advance the things that we believe in into society, culture, politics, and government. So this week, we are looking forward to serving you on Friday. However, I wanted to remind you that we have 48 hours left before this Friday's briefing, and that is a lot of time for you to invite people that you know to join us on that briefing. We're going to be dedicating this Friday to getting people started right. Of course, we're going to recap some things and summarize some things we've done already, but we are going to be introducing the new person to some very, very good information. So please take advantage of the opportunity to have your friends join us and family members, church family members, and pastors and leaders. Of course, we are welcoming everyone this week. So I look forward to serving you there. Now, in the meantime, I wanted to include in this midweek touch point a conversation that I had with Faytene earlier this week. She was kind enough to give me a call and say, hey, Doug, how about if we just get together and talk about what happened with the Conservative Party of Canada leadership election race. So please enjoy this next interview. Faytene, of course, is a real professional. I just have the utmost respect for her and for My Canada Association and the work that they do. And it was just an absolute joy to spend time with her. And I know you're going to enjoy hearing from her again today. So be blessed, enjoy this, and we'll look forward to seeing you this Friday on the National Leadership Briefing. Bye for now.
Well, hey everyone, welcome back. You are going to want to stick around for this entire conversation because I have got none other than Doug Sharp with me. He is the host of the National Leadership Briefing, also the engineer and main voice of something called Conservative Update and also Operation Engage. We are here to chop it up and talk about what happened with the CPC Leadership Race just barely over about a week and a half ago now. So Doug, thank you so much for joining me today from British Columbia.
Indeed. Good to be with you.
Yeah.
On the other side of the country.
We're literally spanning the whole nation right now. I'm here in New Brunswick, so it's good to have you with me. I know you've always got very insightful perspectives, but leading up into the Conservative Leadership Race, the announcement of the winner on the 24th, you were pushing something called Conservative Update. First of all, for those that aren't aware of what that is, just give us a quick overview.
Do that. We saw in the beginning of this leadership election race, we saw the possibility that that what was important to the people that we serve in the faith communities of Canada were not going to be part of the conversation within the context of that leadership race. We saw the possibility, in fact, that Christian conservatives were going to be shut out of that race altogether. And so we felt it was important to identify clearly at a single identifiable location online, conservativeupdate.com, a place where we could house what our views and values were and then try to use that base as a place to advance them into the conversation. So when you go to conservativeupdate.com, even today, we've left the website up and we'll continue to use it, you'll find an entire platform that represents our views and values, our principles, our ideas represented in legislative and policy proposals. So we wanted to create this base and then share our views and values with all of the candidates that did participate in the race so that we could have influence in the conversation that was going to take place. And of course, ultimately, we wanted to impact the outcome of the race as well.
And honestly, Doug, I think you succeeded on both of those fronts, and we're going to get to that just in a moment here. But first of all, Conservative Update, was framed around something called the 4 pillars. Can you just quickly summarize what the 4 pillars are for those watching?
Certainly, and it's important to know that the 4 pillars, where they came from, was out of a series of surveys that we started back in 2016. We surveyed the church to find out what people thought were the priorities, and this is what they came up with. They told us first and foremost that a parent's right to raise their children the way they wanted was of critical importance to almost everyone in the church in Canada. They wanted to have the freedom to pass on those values to their kids. The second one was that those we elect to serve us in civil government, they really wanted politicians and elected officials to respect our right of belief and freedom of religion. And they also wanted, the third pillar was, they wanted, while those political individuals were in office, that they wanted them to make sure that they were enacting policies and passing laws that provided for the safety and security of the citizens, but in particular cared for the vulnerable. So there was a heart for that. So that was the third pillar. And then the fourth one, fiscal stewardship. It's not appropriate for civil government right now to be just burying our children and future generations in debt that's going to actually appear in their lives as excessive taxation. So those are the four pillars, and those are the principles that we wanted to advance into that CPC leadership election race.
Super commonsensical. And I would even go so far as to say that there's people not in the faith community that would be, heck yes, I agree with all four of those pillars. So this is crossover. So you were basically bringing these ideas forward to the leadership candidates, and you were giving them an opportunity to respond back in terms of how they would navigate on these different issues that are important to Canadians. And out of that, there were really two candidates that shone above the others, and it's no surprise to anyone that would be Dr. Leslyn Lewis and also Derek Sloan, who are really strong on all four of the pillars. Now, you encourage people to buy a membership, you encourage people to get engaged in the process, and yet at the end of the day, neither of those candidates that were really great and strong on the four pillars won. So I want to just ask this question. What's the good news in this story? Is there anything positive that came out of all of this activity, all of this focus, all of this effort?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because we did mobilize. We all saw a huge number of new people come into the conversation and participate in the political process because they wanted to exercise their influence as citizens. So they don't have a lot of experience in politics and how elections work and things like that. So there might have been a great deal of disappointment if their particular candidate didn't win, or if their specific desired outcome didn't occur. But this is what I can tell you as somebody who's been around for quite a while, is that what I personally think I witnessed here was something nothing short of miraculous. We have to recall, first of all, that at the beginning of this Conservative Party of Canada leadership election race, we were this close to being drummed right off of the political landscape in Canada altogether. They were questioning in the mainstream media and in political circles as to whether or not social conservatives or Christian conservatives could even participate in electoral processes. So we were really on the edge of distinction, or extinction, pardon me, not distinction, extinction. So when we all of a sudden find ourselves on election night where they're counting the ballots and they're identifying the number of people that showed up in support of social conservative or Christian conservative principles and candidates who actually carried them forward into the race. And we saw on that night, remember Faytene, we saw that at the second ballot stage of the election, Dr. Leslyn Lewis, who had a predominantly four-pillar platform that she was advancing and sharing and seeking support for, she actually had more votes than either Aaron O'Toole or Peter MacKay. So these ideas were very popular. So when you say, what can I tell people? I go, my goodness, we were on our way out the door, and then all of a sudden we're dominating in the actual election on election night right up to the very end. I mean, it was a lot closer than I think most people even realize that don't get into the numbers and analyze the outcome of the election. So I'm real excited about not just what occurred that night, but the foundation that was laid for us to move forward into the future. We've got a lot of people engaging in the process right now who share our views and values, and that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and there were a few numbers that were absolutely riveting. Number one, record-breaking memberships for the Conservative Party of Canada. And who were those people? Well, we know that a lot of those people that were buying memberships were people that are, I want to call it the family values vote, because I think there's like I said, I think there's a lot of people that were voting for Dr. Leslyn Lewis and that would adhere to the four pillars that don't necessarily call themselves Christian, but just, resonate with freedom, really resonate with democracy. So that was amazing, seeing the record number of memberships purchased. And I believe it The Conservative Party said that they broke a record for any party in any leadership race in terms of the number of memberships purchased. The other thing is when you look at the votes between Dr. Leslyn Lewis and Derek Sloan, those 4 pillar candidates on the first round, it equated, my estimation is equated about 34% of the vote. But I also know from speaking to a lot of people from the faith community and people that would be family values voters, that a lot of them actually voted for O'Toole and McKay because they thought Dr. Leslyn Lewis didn't have a chance. They were just kind of going with the old school political groupthink. And so, possibly, it is very possible that the family values vote in the Conservative Party of Canada right now equates somewhere between 40 to 50% at least, if not more, of the membership. That in itself, that is watershed in my assessment. What do you think?
It is. You've got that is spot on, Faytene, is that this is very unfamiliar ground. I mean, I've got a clip that we're going to be sharing on the next national leadership briefing of Evan Solomon on election night saying that they are seeing numbers right now. And this was on election night as they were starting to realize what was unfolding in front of them. Even the mainstream media had to admit that they haven't seen numbers like this during any time Andrew Scheer was the leader or even during the Stephen Harper years. And that takes us right back to the beginning of day one of the Conservative Party of Canada. So yeah, you're right. This is uncharted territory and it's pretty exciting.
And even in terms of donations, I think the last tally that I saw was Dr. Leslyn Lewis was at about 2.2 million that came in pretty much since March, right? And I know for Andrew Scheer, to just compare apples to apples, when he was running for the leadership, donations were significantly lower than that. And so again, all of this signaling to the invigoration in Canadians, the hearts of Canadians and people getting involved. So I want to say way to go for those people that are watching this right now, that you bought a membership for the first time and you voted for the first time. And way to go, Doug. You did an incredible job giving leadership to grassroots Canadians from sea to sea. And so, so there's lots to celebrate. The other thing too, Dr. Leslyn Lewis, could you just talk for a moment about the impact that she had? Because that has been a lot of the story. The way she ran her campaign and the way she laid out her ideas has had a major culture shifting impact on the party. Talk about that for a moment, Doug, as in terms of the win.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. That's really important because for years I worked as an employee of the House of Commons, and I worked for a federal cabinet minister, and I would regularly see in the House of Commons lots of members of Parliament that they were hoping to hear from people from the base. They were willing to step forward. They were willing to stand up and defend our principles right on the front lines, the political front lines. However, they oftentimes felt or sounded like perhaps like a clanging cymbal because they really didn't have the wave of support behind them. Well, what has just occurred here in Canada is that we've had someone from our community who has been willing to stand up and say, I am willing to serve you and I'm willing to represent your views and values and take them forward and present them to the Canadian public. And I need you to participate along with me. And that's why you saw things like the donations going so high and the numbers of people supporting Dr. Lewis so high, is because they were, for the first time in a long time, that we actually had a political leader stand up and say they're willing to serve and they're willing to bring our views forward. And they encouraged us in a way that we came in behind them. And Derek Sloan, I got to say as well, he had a passionate group of people behind him as well, and they were willing to run the race with him. But we need to be there to support the people who are willing to run and serve. That's critically important right now. And Dr. Leslyn Lewis is somebody who I think is a good candidate to get behind and do just that.
Mm-hmm. And hats off, huge respect to anybody that throws their hat in the ring, right? In a leadership run. It is a huge sacrifice, huge sacrifice, not only for the individual, but for their families. It's a risk, right? And so hats off to both Derek, Leslyn, and all the candidates, really. Let's talk, Doug, about what we can learn. Different organizations have put out analytics since August the 24th. Some have gone so far as to say if the pro-life members of parliament in the Conservative caucus across the board. If simply the pro-life candidates would have endorsed Leslyn and would have leveraged to get behind her, she would be the leader today. There are others that are going so far as to say that if those that put Derek first and Aaron third would have just put Leslyn number 2, that we would have a 4-pillar candidate as the leader of the Conservative Party today. Do you agree with some of these analytics? And, what would your encouragement be to people as we chew on that?
Yeah, I've heard many of the same things that you have. My bent is maybe a little bit different. I take a look at it from a little bit different perspective. Whenever I see close races, whenever I see someone coming up just short in an election, I always immediately think about the responsibility that we all have to learn from this from the perspective of, well, if we had just brought more people, then we wouldn't have had that problem. So I think to myself, okay, look at the second ballot voting where Leslyn came up just slightly short of actually winning the whole thing. I mean, she really did. I mean, it really came close to Leslyn Lewis winning the whole thing. Well, rather than taking a look at if we had done that and if we had done that, well, what if we had just mobilized twice as many people into the process? Then it would have been a runaway, and it would have been an absolute, political trouncing, if you don't mind me using that word. And so when we're in elections, like elections are kind of tough, and they a lot of people get all sort of, they use dominant language and everything. I always say, look, if you want to run in an election and you want to be a candidate, you want to win, then your plan has to be to not just beat your candidate, you have to overwhelm them. You have to, if you need 1,000 votes to win, then you should be actually looking for 2,000 votes. You can't just look to just slightly beat your candidate. So that's what it is that I would suggest, is that if you want to learn anything from this, is we got to bring more guys next time, or gals, of course. We've got to actually bring more people in the conversation. But the good thing is that we're learning how to do that through this last process. We've learned to now network and build our networks and grow support for our ideas on the ground and come together. And that's really what's exciting about the road forward. Is you take a look at the 60,000 people that voted for Leslyn in the first and second ballot, or supported Leslyn in that first and second ballot. Well, if you can bring 60,000 people together, you can bring 600,000 people together. It's just a little bit more work. That's all. So I'm excited about the possibilities there as well.
I would agree, Doug. And, I was kind of crunching it in my own mind the morning after and thinking, okay, if I was to take a guess, so everything from, super traditional Greek Orthodox, Orthodox Catholic kind of being one end of the spectrum, all the way to like your flaming charismatic Pentecostals, and everything in between. If I had to take a guess and say how many individuals in the active church community nationwide across every denomination are actually involved at the grassroots level of shaping our nation politically. And I think it's important to say that the reason that I know that you and I are on the same page with this, the reason we agree that this is an important activity for Canadians and people of faith is because government affects every area of life. It affects our freedom, our finances, our family, increasingly our ability to worship freely in Canada. And so if you're to look at that whole spectrum of people who call themselves Christians, my guess would be we're probably still somewhere between 15 and 20% of real engagement. That's people buying a membership, actually getting involved in the process. And that might even be generous. And yet, with that small amount of people getting involved at the grassroots level, you look at the impact where an estimated 40 to 50% of the votes on the weekend of the 24th were from that community. So what that tells me, Doug, is that community is actually the tipping point when it comes to the 4 pillars. That community, there is so much upside here. That community, we are so far from tapping our potential, which to me is actually a really exciting thing, because if we just wake up to the power that's in our hand, it's actually quite easy to shift the nation.
That's right, Faytene, and you don't have to look too far for confirmation in the arena of politics, because, and this is probably for another conversation, but the reality is that's why those who oppose our views and values, those who resist allowing us to participate, that's why one of their primary goals is to dismantle the church in Canada. They do not want us to wake up one day and realize what it is that we have. But the thing is that politics is, you know me, I always go through this. I have more fun than anybody else when it comes to politics, because at the end of the day, I'm willing to go with the will of the room. If you bring your folks, we bring our folks, we have a good conversation about our ideas, and then whoever comes out on top comes out on top. And I'm willing to support the leader. And especially in this case, I want to say that everybody should be getting behind the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada right now. And what we should be doing, instead of trying to undermine the leader because they perhaps a little bit more moderate than we are, we should be working to support the leader and create balance within that party, though, so that our views and values are adequately represented within that party. Remember, we're not in there all the time to take over everything, but we do want to make sure that our ideas are considered among the mix of ideas out there. And that's why we need to continue to work within that party.
Okay, we've got to speak to the elephant in the room on that one, because I think it was day 2 after he was announced leader. Aaron O'Toole pressed in the national media on the issue of abortion. No surprise. And he comes right out in that interview and says, listen, I was elected as a pro-choice leader. I am pro-choice. And I would say in the current Canadian context, that means that you're pro-abortion, because there are no restrictions on abortion in Canada right now. You can abort right up into full-term birth, which when most people find that out, they're disturbed by that. And so, but he's saying, hey, I'm all for it. I'm for, the status quo on this thing. For people of faith, people in your movement, even people not of faith, people that just adhere to that pillar of, being a voice for the voiceless, the most vulnerable amongst us, what do you say to them when it comes to Aaron O'Toole's remarks?
Well, again, we talked about this earlier on about the number of new people that are engaged in this process. So if I was talking to the brand new person that didn't have a lot of experience in political processes and political parties, I would say stick around, because there are in political parties as much influence as the leader has, and as much as the party follows the nose of the leader on issues like that, there are a lot of balances that are built into the constitutions and into the policy opportunities within political parties where our voice can still be heard. And especially now, because again, we knew going into this that we would be electing as leader of this party someone who could become the next Prime Minister of Canada. It's very important that this person has a balance placed on them if they don't share our views and values when it comes to abortion or euthanasia or any of the other, or marijuana laws, whatever the issue is. We want to make sure that we're continuing to engage in the conversations on those issues. And I've got some good news for everybody, is that our actual ideas on those issues make a lot of sense. Take a look at, for instance, Dr. Leslyn Lewis's view on the pregnancy care centers. That one platform plank alone, that was just outstanding for her to be talking about that. And it's an issue related to abortion. But it's so popular with so many Canadians. I would like to think that Aaron O'Toole, there's a good possibility that we could work with Aaron O'Toole to see that advanced in Canada still, that policy initiative. So but we've got to stay engaged. We've got to stay on the field. We can't fold up our tent and go home right now. There's more work to be done.
Okay. So stay engaged, stay in the conversation, and you have faith that this demographic can continue to shape the narrative going forward through influence. So
I'm convinced. I'm completely convinced. I have witnessed it again, something that is nothing short of a miracle in this, and many over the years, lots of other miracles as well. So I have absolute confidence that everything is going to be great as long as we accept our responsibilities as citizens to engage in the political processes and exercise our influence as Christians.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is now is not the time to pull out. That is Doug's opinion. Okay, so let's talk about going forward then. Let's talk about going forward. Some of the opportunities that we might have as Canadians here, even in the next few months. We could be in an election within 30 to 60 days. Actually, as a matter of fact, some people are predicting that by Thanksgiving, there's a 50% possibility that we will be in a general election. So what do Canadians do right now to engage in the journey?
Well, one thing that we're going to be talking about an awful lot on the immediate road ahead with the National Leadership Briefing is the formation of civic affairs committees locally in churches, and that's the establishment of a infrastructure inside churches to help support the efforts of the pastor to identify opportunities locally for them to engage in political processes that are available to them. So we've got, for example, if you have a church in a riding, a local electoral district, and they have a few hundred people in the church, there's a lot that church can do to help bring their values introduce it into a process in an election. They can help identify the candidate. They can help elect the candidate. They can support the candidate financially. They can do all sorts of things. That's just, as far as the election goes, the one thing. That's a candidacy of a person. They could help identify someone in their congregation to be a candidate. But that's an example of what you can do locally, but you can also network with other churches regionally and federally, and then you can build that coalition over time that takes government. And actually, we have a much different looking government than we would have now in that case.
And realistically, let's say that the writ does get dropped and we're in an election by Thanksgiving. There's a good chance that churches just aren't even going to have time to organize before that for a civic engagement committee. We don't even know if some churches are going to be meeting again in full capacity by that time. And so just get involved, right? Wherever you are.
That's why I say, in the meantime, everybody just get on the National Leadership Briefing, because every single month we are going to be getting together and slowly moving this thing forward. It's 1 hour once a month. That's all I'm asking for. But we stay connected, we stay in touch with each other, and we look for those opportunities where we can work together to have influence and affect the outcome of some of these opportunities in the political sphere.
And if we are in a general election, just for people that maybe aren't familiar with the political process, that means that Doug mentioned the nominations, that in every single riding, it is going to be decided who is going to be running for the respective parties. So getting involved, calling up your member of parliament, calling up the party in your riding that you want to support and say, hey, I want to be a part of this process. I want to know who's on the roster. I want to know if nobody's on the roster so I can help get a great person on the roster. These are all things that we can be doing right now. And so, Doug, if people have questions, they just want some mentorship on how to engage effectively and appropriately at this point in the timeline, can they give you a call or an email?
Yeah, they can, most definitely. You can get in touch with me at president@familyaction.ca. Again, that's president@familyaction.ca. But again, I'd encourage you to go to NLBcanada.ca. That's National Leadership Briefing is what it stands for. NLBcanada.ca, and register for the next National Leadership Briefing, because a lot of your questions are going to be answered. We are already looking for those opportunities where you can exercise your influence as a Christian in Canada in this sphere of politics and government. So we'll definitely be able to answer any questions through that process as well.
Amazing. And we've got a leadership race happening with the Green Party of Canada. That's going to be right around the bend. We've got the policy convention for the Conservative Party. I know they're still trying to figure out the details of if it's going to be an online event or in Quebec City. So many opportunities to be a wonderful influence. So final words to Canada, Doug, before we end this interview.
Do not leave this party, because it's just getting started.
Ain't no party like a Holy Ghost party, because the Holy Ghost party don't stop. Is that what you're saying?
And I'm not even talking about the political party. I'm just talking about it's actually a good time. I mean, we've had a lot of fun throughout this entire process. And remember, all political parties, we should be engaging in them all. There could be a leadership election race within the Liberal Party of Canada very soon. So we want to have some say in there as well.
Okay. So stay engaged. Operation Engage. That's what you're all about, Doug. Thank you so much. Website, what is it?
Well, NLBcanada.ca is where you register for the National Leadership Briefing. If you want to check out conservativeupdate.com just to see what we've been working on there within the Conservative Party of Canada, feel free to go there.
Okay, great. And of course, another resource as well is formycanada.ca. There's national updates, alerts going out there, prayer initiatives as well. And of course, there's also the great organization, itstartsrightnow.ca. Scott and Alyssa, want to give them a shout out too, because they do tremendous work in mobilizing the grassroots. So thank you so much for your time today, Doug. And thank you for giving some really important understanding at this important moment for our nation.
Thank you. Good to be with you.